I could do stuff in Numpy that I would always have to run 3 or 4 times because it would have a shape error. And then like after, I don't know, 1 week of studying some APL, I could just visualize how I would do that, and I would just run and no error every time. Like 1 week of studying APL did more for my expertise in Numpy than more than 1 year coding in Jags and Numpy.
Welcome to another episode of ArrayCast. My name is Conor, and today I bring to you 3 different panelists and a special guest. So we'll go around quickly and do introductions, and then we're going to have a couple announcements, and then we'll hop into introducing our guests. So we'll start with Bob, then go to Rich, and then go to Marshall.
I'm Bob Therriault. I am a J enthusiast. I am not a professional programmer, and I've been doing lots of work on the J Wiki.
I'm Rich Park. I'm an APL programmer and educator working for Dialogue Limited.
I'm Marshall Lockbaum. I used to be a J programmer, and then I was a dialogue developer for a while, and now I develop BQN.
And as mentioned before, my name's Conor. Oh, yeah, I was about to say I'm a professional C++ developer working for NVIDIA, but technically I'm actually a researcher now working for NVIDIA. Still using C++ a little bit here and there, I guess. But yeah, slight role change. And I guess maybe in a future episode we can talk about that. A few announcements, though. I think we're going to go to Bob with a couple announcements, then we'll go to Rich, and then we'll circle back to me for one final announcement, and then we'll hop into introducing our guest today.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm involved with the J Wiki, and I've started to make some videos and sort of bring people up to date. Now, the most recent one that I've done about the J Wiki was some of the things that are in the existing wiki. A lot of the work we're doing is trying to reorganize this wiki, which has got a huge amount of information in diverse places. Well, last night I did a video explaining where those diverse places are and some of the information that you can find on it. If you haven't looked at the J Wiki before because it's just too confusing, or somebody's given you a link and you didn't know where they sent you, but it was neat stuff, this is a bit more of a roadmap into how to get to things a little bit easier. I'm not going to claim it's easy because the J Wiki is big and it's sprawling, and we're going to work on that. But this should help out a little bit. And then the other thing I did this week is I finished up my J promo video. So it's about 3 minutes and 7 seconds long, and it's all about the reasons you should be interested in J. So we'll put links to both of those on this one, and hopefully you enjoy them.
Cool. I guess in more array language, informational, educational news, the British APL Association, the recent general meeting, announced that they have completed scanning old editions of the Vector journal, which is the journal of the British APL Association. And so we expect in the coming future, hopefully not too long, that those will be put online. I imagine you'll be able to find out more on britishaplassociation.org, and we'll definitely put links to those when we get them.
Yeah, we will definitely include links in the show notes to both of those. And my final announcement is that I'm actually not sure if we ever talked about CPP North on this podcast, but if you follow sort of my podcast, Cinematic Universe, you'll know that CPP North was a C++ conference that took place just in the last couple weeks, if you're listening to this in July or August of 2022. And I gave a talk at that conference. It was a C++ conference, but secretly that talk was, 50 to 75% about APL, depending on how you look at it. And there is a recording of it that I sort of live streamed on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested, we'll leave a link in the show notes for folks to check that out. And with those announcements out of the way, today we're going to be introducing to you, hopefully I pronounce this correctly, but if I pronounce it incorrectly, he will correct me, João Araújo. And I think currently João is in Brazil, but will be based in Toronto, so we're going to be geolocated in the same place. And I first met João, I believe, from the same way that Bob and I met, which was I was live streaming sort of the J programming translations from C, or the macro C that J source is, into C++. That only lasted for a few months, but I believe that is the first time that sort of João and I interacted. I could be mistaken about that. We might have actually interacted on Twitter before that. João can correct me if I'm wrong. And since then, basically, we've sort of become friends, and we've met up once or twice in Toronto. And João operates in the machine learning space, so I believe doesn't use Julia day to day, but is a big fan of the Julia programming language and uses Python at work. And we did our, what was it, the sort of 1 year anniversary episode, and we sort of gave a call out to if folks have different things they want to discuss. And João reached out to me to bring up the topic of what potentially the limitations of array languages are compared to other programming languages, and things potentially that the array languages, and not just the languages, but the communities could do to sort of address those shortcomings. So I'll stop there, throw it over to João, who can introduce himself, give us a short history of, how you got to where you are today, and then we can hop into the discussion of, what array languages can do better.
So hi, the pronunciation was pretty good.
Thank you.
But it's João Araújo, if anyone knows like the perfect one. Yeah. So my background, like, I came from a very small town in Brazil. I did lots of scientific Olympiads when I was in middle school to beginning of high school, but like really lots of them, 40 or something more probably. Yeah, so and among them there was the computer science Olympiad, which I really loved. And then from there, like the idea of okay, I want to do CS game. So this was very good because here you have to choose your major before going to college, and normal high schools don't prepare you to know what major you want. It's like, oh, I like math. Yeah, you can do any of the 27 recognized engineering disciplines. Yeah. But thankfully I had this better idea. Once I joined college, I decided, okay, let's try to do research and start, learning deeply about something. And here in my campus, the things that I had the best chance of doing that was deep learning, and so I started studying deep learning, reading papers, producing some content. Eventually got hired by my company right now. It's called Cohere, which does natural language processing. But I wanted to become also a better programmer, and from that I found Conor's programming language virtual meetup, which has the focus of doing that, right? Learning how to do cool programs and stuff like that. And so I'm not sure if I first met you on the J video or through the PLVM, but it was something around that. And yeah, I think that's most of our background. I have some experience with array programming. A lot comes from Numpy and Jax in Python and, well, Julia. I have studied some APL. I was like learning APL and showing to my friends at the same time, which was pretty nice. It's a cool experience to learn APL with friends, especially because APL is super cool and the whole glyphs thing is like kind of magical. So yeah, I really like that. And I am doing some, I don't know, like I plan to release some community work for array languages in the sense that I have that search engine that goes over specifically like the JWiki, the APL wiki, and similar. And at the moment, I am hosting the K APL site on my site until someone brings it back. So it's this, I just sent on the chat. It's like a celebration of the life of Kenneth Eugene Iverson, which was a site with a lot of links and papers and stuff like that about Iverson and APL. I'm not sure what happened, but the main website has gone like out of maintenance, and no one has seemed to take it on. And so I'm just hosting it on my GitHub page until someone either tells me that I'm breaking some law or someone brings the original site back. Yeah, maybe Warner Bros.
The copyright police come after you.
Was that keiapl.org before?
Yes.
And you can see the curator at email, which presumably will go into a black hole now if you.
And those are Ken Iverson's initials for anybody confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure all of us or most of us clicked on the link that João just shared, and I definitely stumbled across this because if anyone has watched my talk, almost like half of the links are indirectly referenced. I mean, the quotations and anecdotes link was directly referenced. The IBM 5100, I'm pretty sure that's where I got like the HD photos from. So yeah, super awesome that you're hosting this. And I'm pretty sure Wayback would give you access to it, but that's definitely a barrier to entry for folks that are trying to explore stuff.
Yeah. And Wayback's kind of ugly sometimes. So
yes, very true, very true.
Yeah. So hosting directly on GitHub is probably better.
Yeah, and I'll have to find out more about this because I didn't know it had been discontinued, and I'm guessing it'll talk to Eric and find out why. And I think some of that is we've transferred from the J software over to the wiki, but not maybe all of it. But thank you for doing this. This is great, João. That's fantastic. And I'll find out if we can take the pressure off you.
Yeah, no, this is very no problem. I'm starting to do that for other websites too. So there was also a scheme one that had lots of awesome scheme papers, like a ton of stuff and historical notes and all that. That also, went under, but it's somewhere on my GitHub nowadays. I don't know where, but yeah.
Yeah. A collection of disappearing websites with fantastic links for those that are interested in the history of computing. Yeah, so we'll definitely put a link to, and I encourage listeners to go and check this out because, definitely at some point I stumbled across it and clearly was moved by it because I ended up including a bunch of the material that was linked in this page to.
Yeah, no, it's just amazing from a history perspective. Just a treasure trove, really. And on the topic that I would like to discuss, I think I changed it a little bit and never told you, but I think what I wanted to talk about more is like it's related to the second part of what array language can do to be, to have a larger audience. And I think that the main idea really is going back to the whole tool for thought that, Iverson had in mind when he started creating APL. I don't think going back means, we should stop thinking about these things as programming languages. I think, they are programming languages, obviously. But I think integrating with other tool for thoughts and with the tool for thoughts community would bring a lot to APL, BQN, and similar. I think BQN is very well positioned for that because it has, the JavaScript implementation. And so I think for you could easily make an BQN extension for Girão research and Obsidian and LogSeq. And I think the people there would really love that, would really love to have that, and would really love the culture of APL. So the community of tools for thoughts, just like that, they're trying to build tools that allow people to think better and to even like go beyond what you could normally think of. So they have a lot of influence for guys like Vannevar Bush and Alan Kay, and I always forget all of the names, but
so cool. Is this a ethereal entity that you're referring to as the tool of thought community, or is this an actual like there's a domain or website like or forum that people chat on? Is it ethereal, or is it more not concrete because a community can't really be concrete, but
I think there are many forums. There's like Tool for Thoughts Rock, which is a monthly podcast / YouTube series. There are many Discords, even in, for example, the Obsidian Discord or the LogSeq Discord. They have channels for talking about other tools for thought, especially because
that Obsidian is in the like Markdown based knowledge base software. Do you guys know about this? You've seen Obsidian? It's like, imagine you're doing notes in Markdown, but it's much less laborious to link to other notes.
Yeah, so I should probably talk a little bit about tools for thought, right? Okay. Yeah, so in the current iteration, you have things like Roam, Obsidian, and Logseek are the biggest ones. There are others. And these ones, in some sense, they are in a specific category where you have easy linking, as Rich just said. So if you want to link to another page, you just use double brackets.
Square brackets.
Yeah. You just do double square brackets and write the title or an alias, and yeah, that's a link. So it's extremely easy to link, and they want it to be easy because they want you to be linking your thoughts all the time. They want you to see the connections and to create this. And another thing that helps with seeing the connections, and well, it just makes you feel, wow, look how smart I am, is that they can show you a graph of your nodes, and so you can see all of those nodes and their interconnections, which is again, it is interesting. It is something that you can take a look at and be like, oh, okay, so I have these two clusters of nodes and they have some connections. Like maybe there's something in here. Maybe there is a general node that could link to everything. Like, and another very important point in my mind, at least, is that they have backlinks. So whenever I link to from page A to B, and I can look at B and say, oh, page A is linking to you. So you can see the connections in both directions. So these are the high level ideas of them. They are writing software. They have differences. So Obsidian is document markdown based. Roam and Logseek are more outliner, bullet points based. They have extension stores where you can add a ton of interesting things to them. And then there's the whole community around those things. They use those apps. They also use stuff like Anki or space repetition that they can just integrate with those apps. There's Muse, which is more like a workbench for you to think, and then the idea would be you would Muse to connect PDFs and videos and all that and think, and then you crystallize that on a note in your Obsidian row or whatever. Yeah.
This is so I'm learning a lot right now. I had heard of Obsidian, but and a few folks had recommended it to me, but just for the listener. So I heard Rome, and in my head I spelt out Rome, and then I went and Googled Obsidian Rome, and then I got back, what did I get back? I got back a song by I think a band called Obsidian called Rome. So Rome is not Rome, it's ROAM. And then Logseek is, I think, probably how it sounds, LOGSEQ. And then also, too, it seems like, Google's recommending a couple others called Notion and RemNote. So I had no idea that there was a competing ecosystem, of these note-taking apps. And I also didn't realize that there was this. And so was the podcast that you mentioned Thoughts That Rock, or was it something else?
Tools for Thought Rocks.
Tools for Thought Rocks. Okay, we'll have to find that and link that as well. So this is all. And so do you use these sort of note-taking apps religiously? Do you have a favorite or?
Yeah. So right now I'm using mostly Logseek.
Mm-hmm.
I have used all of the others in the past, including the ones that Google recommended you. Yeah, it's been somewhat of a journey. Right now, I like Logseek because I really like this outliner view. So to me, Obsidian, by being, based on text, I think my mind, because of the way I studied, is more outliner based, and so it fits better with my mind. And I had some issues with the Rome founder, and so I'm not using that. So yeah.
So this is all new to me, but you said BQN might be good for integrating with this, and I do have some experience with using BQN and Markdown because that's how the BQN site is put together. So I started with just the normal thing on GitHub. I had my GitHub repository, and I put up some Markdown pages to explain how things work. And eventually I decided I was copy pasting a lot from BQN sessions into that because I wanted to show the code and what it does. And eventually I decided well, I want to run BQN in this, so I'll just make my own Markdown engine in BQN so that, of course, it can run BQN code. And I did that, and that's what I use now. And it is pretty nice. I've added some extensions after that, so it can also, I can put in a Markdown comment that's executed as BQN code, and I use that to put together diagrams too. And yeah, it is pretty nice to be able to do this and be able to, write your document, write some BQN code, not even like you may not even need to evaluate it if it's a simple line, and then build the document and reload it and see you have your document there and the results immediately all together, so you can keep writing based on that. So I think that is pretty useful. I've started using it for another project that's demonstrating kind of how to use music theory with some examples in BQN. And so I think that is a good mix.
Yeah, no, I think people just love it, and I've I really believe that you can integrate BQN with like logseq in, I don't know, one day, one afternoon or something like that. Because they just have a very simple extension system, and yeah. So
yeah, I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, and really, like, this is the community that thinks a lot about new ways of thinking, and if you just throw the notation as a tool for thought at them, they'll be like, well, we really need to use this. And if you can integrate with their tools nowadays, just they would just love it. And I think that that's a very good path forward that would help both the array programming community and the tools for thought community. I also think that there's a lot of things pointed in that direction, just like how people talk about APL. I think Alan Purley said that, well, APL doesn't have many libraries because sometimes the solving of that problem is as important as the final solution. Like, pretty much thinking through and building that was as important as just having a solution, pre-made solution that you could use. And I think, like, I had some notes. I don't think I'll go through all of them, but like, over many different people that you brought to discuss in this podcast, many of them alluded to some ideas of like how the nice thing about APL is how it changes the way you think, and how you think differently and more efficiently, and all of that in APL. Like, it's very focused on the way on thoughts, just like that other communities focus. Like, not many people will tell you that Python changed the way they think.
So I guess you recently started diving into APL. Has that changed the way that you mentioned NumPy jacks?
Yeah, right after that, I just like I could do stuff in NumPy that I would always have to run 3 or 4 times because it would have a shape error. And then, like, after, I don't know, 1 week of studying some APL, I could just visualize how I would do that, and I would just run and no error every time. Like, 1 week of studying APL did more for my, let's say, expertise in NumPy than more than 1 year coding in JAGs and NumPy.
All right, clip it. Put it on a T-shirt. Put it on a poster. I mean, yeah, that's awesome to hear. And yeah, it's even, yeah, so much of what you're saying resonates, and like even, and I think this is something I've started to think about. I was actually talking with Tony Vannevar, who's a member of the C++ community at the CPP North conference, is that I think a part of the reason why I fell in love with APL is that I started to fall in love with the C++ algorithms, which essentially operate on sequences, like, rank 1 vectors, and many other libraries in other languages sort of don't fit that model. They have folds, they have unfolds, things like splits and chunk by, etc. But in C++, it was really just like, you get a range, you give back a range, or you give back an iterator. So they've got folds, and they've got basically transforms. And the matrix is basically just an extension of that model. Like, you go from operating on, a rank 1 to a rank 2. And it's almost like that, like the C++ algorithm library is kind of like a subset of like APL. Like, no one's going to agree with that statement, but in my head, like going from doing transforms on, sequences, aka rank 1 vectors, to doing transforms on rank 2 vectors, aka matrices, it's like a natural extension. And like where I was in sort of learning things, it made a lot of sense. Anyway, so yeah, what you're saying about it just being like, you learn so much so quickly. Like you said, a year of Numpy isn't, you can compare it to basically a week in APL, because it completely, and you were talking about shapes, but I find that like even the APL model for thinking about rank one vectors or strings is like incredibly useful. Like so many LeetCode problems aren't dealing with matrices, and not that like LeetCode is the benchmark for like what makes a good language, but like, every week I go and check out, what are the problems, and so many of them will be solvable in APL, and it has nothing to do with matrices. It's just you'll have a string, or you'll have some list of numbers, and you have to do something with it, and yeah, it's an incredibly good fit. I guess is my point.
How much do you think of that is the array model and how you interact with that itself in APL, or do you think having the notation and the way the syntax works benefits, especially in terms of, like you say, about the speed of getting to that place of being able to think about the shapes?
I think the notation is pretty important. Like I truly believe that the notation, it's just like that thing about you can keep 5 plus or minus 2 things that are had at the same time. It's in fact like 4, but anyway, yeah. But just having a specific notation for complex operations just allows you to keep it in your mind. Like you can keep more complex concepts in your mind at the same time. You can do chunking much more easily than if you had to do like a bunch of fors for every one of those things, and those fors each have weird indexes that you have to somehow remember. Or I think going from fors to just the functional programming version is already a nice step, but then going to a specific notation for that gives you much more. And the APL notation specifically, and I'm sorry for folks from other languages, but like it's so well crafted. I mean, there are a couple of things I'm against, but that it's so well crafted. The symmetries in the operators, like you look at an operator, and if you know another one that's similar, you'll be like, oh, okay, so this probably does something like that. That's just magical too.
I also wonder, because you're talking about these other tools for thought that are more like actual full-on systems for like note-taking and things like that. The extent to which you have this short notation, you're doing kind of more sooner, more complex things expressed in a compact way. But when it comes to expressing that to other people, I mean, especially people outside of the array language community, you're putting a lot of words around it. You have to explain a lot of stuff for them to get the same ideas. Of course, when you share the code with someone who understands that code, you can keep the terseness. But maybe these notebooks, I mean, people have been finding, that's what Jeremy Howard said, he loves the notebooks. I think APL is really good with the notebooks. Stefan Kruger's book, that's a Jupyter book as well. And even Rodrigo's reworking of mastering dialogue is in that format, and I think that lends really well to having lots of prose and then a little bit of code, and it's not too much code that you're now getting lost in the code and forgetting what you were reading before.
That's how I think it will be integrated if you suddenly have an APL, BQN, or J mode for, I don't know, logseq. I think that would be the way people would use it.
I think that could be really good.
Speaking of Jeremy and notebooks, you folks should take a look at Quarto. It's a new notebook system and also a new publishing system, and you can kind of use any Jupyter kernel to code in it, and so you could easily do an APL plus Quarto, and it easily export to HTML and PDF and something like 20 formats. And it's pretty nice, pretty ergonomic.
Yeah, we'll definitely throw a link into the show notes in that. Yeah, I'm not sure. This is going to kind of veer off of a little bit, but it's just topical because I did this, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? When I was in Whistler of all things, but I just have so much fun doing this, even though I was taking time off. I mean, it was a weekend, but the most recent LeetCode problem was, and we can do this as like a fun game for the panelists and João, and also the listener. So feel free if you want. I'm not sure if you're running or doing dishes or going for a walk, if you want to pause and think about the solution. But it's a pretty easy problem to explain verbally. You're given a list of numbers, and you are allowed to do a series of operations where basically you choose a value that is at least it's greater than at least the smallest number in the array, and you subtract that from any positive number. And then the question is how many operations, what's the minimum number of operations to get everything to 0?
You subtract that from every number that's at least as high as it. Is that? Yeah, you said positive.
Correct. Yeah. Or
every number that would be positive after you subtracted, or at least not negative.
Correct. Yeah.
Non-negative. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I might have explained that poorly. So I think one of the examples is like, well, I'll just make one up because it doesn't really matter, but it would be like, 2, 3, 6, I guess. So you could subtract 2, and then you'd end up with 0, 1, 4. Then you could subtract 1, and then you get 0, 0, 4, and then you could subtract 4, and then that would leave you with 0, 0, 0. So like the answer to that question, I believe, is subtracting 3 times. And so less important is the algorithm, but the solution involves basically just checking how many unique numbers you have in your list, excluding zeros, because if you have a 0 in your list, that's going to add 1 to your answer. And without taking over the whole episode to work on this problem, it was extremely interesting for me at least, solving this, because an APL, you solve it in like 3 or 4 characters. It's tally, unique, omega, without 0. That's one of the ways to solve it. And without is like the little tilde that basically gets rid of zeros. And I don't believe BQN has without.
No.
So then because BQN doesn't have without, and if you go to the BQN crate and try and look up without, it'll give you basically a filter that's doing a sort of membership. But that, like, the lack of that glyph affects the way that maybe I want to solve it, because now without isn't simple. It's only a couple extra glyphs, but that's affecting the way that I solve the problem. And I'm now thinking, well, maybe it's actually easier to just subtract a 1 or 0, whether there's membership of 0 in the array. And just like, so like the point of this whole thing is that like the glyphs really do affect the way that you, or at least for me, the way that I'm going to solve, because it's like, if I have something that's super simple to reach for, like I'll use it. And obviously there's a couple of people thinking, oh, but what about perf, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's a toy example. A perf doesn't matter here. But it's just that like having a set of operations like wildly affects the way, and then immediately because...
Yeah, well, and it goes both ways, because, I mean, part of the reason without is I go back and forth on without, but definitely intersect. I just don't think intersect is a good way to think about problems. Like if you have it, if you're jumping to a solution in terms of intersect, there's often a simpler solution in terms of filtering. And so that's the reason why I wouldn't want to add that to a language. Without, I could add or not. I kept it out because it was simpler. But intersect and union, I feel, are just...
You're just bringing that up as a different example, or is intersect have...
Well, they're all these like multi-set functions, right?
Yeah, they're all in kind of a group.
For BQN, can you define a new glyph? Like this glyph is equal to this function?
You can't just do assignment within BQN, because then you wouldn't know what role the glyph has. So BQN has to have all the syntax resolved at compile time. There is a system function called rebqn that lets you sort of design your own BQN with whatever primitives you want. So that's our solution for that.
Oh yeah, that was the question. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's really cool.
So I mean, yeah, if you say, well, I like BQN, but I would prefer to have these other primitives, or I mean, particularly if you're doing the kind of desk calculator stuff that like people say J is really good at, then you might want to add a bunch of primitives for things that that are not necessarily good general programming tools, but that do come up a lot when you just have, whatever problem that you encounter. So it's not a perfect solution, but that is BQN's way that it handles it. I was thinking, I'm not sure that it's actually the number of unique values is right, because if you've got like 0, 2, 4, 6, and then you subtract 4, you should get 0, 2, 0, 2, and then you subtract 2 and you're done.
I think
I was wondering if there was going to be some lowest common, or no, greatest common, some divisor calculating thing involved in it.
0, 2, 4, 6. So just a progression that's increasing. So the idea is that when you subtract 4, you connect the 4 to the 0, but you also connect the 2 to the 6.
Yeah, but now okay, so 4 goes to 0, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
Let me get, because I'm pretty sure I just butchered the problem. Hang on for 3.
Yeah, this problem might be pretty hard.
That's why people don't generally do pair programming over audio.
So yeah, the exact problem statement is you're given a non-negative integer array nums. That's the name of the array. In one operation, you must do 2 bullet points. 1, choose a positive integer x such that x is less than or equal to the smallest non-zero. Never mind. I think I said greater than. So
you always just want to choose the smallest non-zero, right?
You, I think, want to choose the smallest non-zero value in your list of numbers. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you don't bring anything to 0.
All right. Well, totally messed up that explanation. So you might have completely.
Oh man, that's an interesting problem. Though.
You the first one or the second one?
The one that you gave. Your problem.
Yeah.
How disappointing to the listener that actually did pause their podcast on their run or washing dishes, solved it in their head, only to discover that I made up a problem that was not, and then haven't presented the actual solution to it.
But you remembered the solution to the more boring problem and have presented us with something far more interesting. So that's good.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a future episode where we can come back and
we keenly await listener solutions.
Go ahead, Bob.
You were talking about performance, and I think it's interesting when you're and the leak code problems, those kind of things are, they're little games to play. Performance, when I'm working with Jay, performance is one aspect that I'm looking at, but it's only one. So there are things that I'm looking for different ways to do it. I'm looking for elegance. I might be code golfing. I might looking for the shortest, most terse way of solving something. But that isn't to say I'm not interested in performance, but performance is one of the things that I'm interested in. If I was only interested in performance, I really feel I'm missing out on a lot of other opportunities I have to think about the problem. Not saying it's not important. In some cases, it's absolutely vital, in which case that's where your focus is. But I think sometimes with programmers, you get into local maxima, basically. You get into the very most performant little nub in the whole problem space. But what you're missing is maybe some really exciting ways to be even more performant, because you're just trying to make a little bump higher and higher when Mount Everest is sitting next to you. And you just didn't think of it that way. And that's why I find a lot of the array languages as tools of thought are really interesting, because to me, they allow me to look at a problem in a number of different ways, and that gives me a wider range of solutions. And the terseness of the array languages makes it much easier for me to keep those things in my head. As you were saying, the 4 plus or minus 2, well, that's exactly why it's easy to start moving around with these things.
Yeah, I think that there are different kinds of programmers. Like when someone is building a full-blown app, I would rather they really focus on performance. But if you have someone they are using programming to augment their workflow, then performance isn't always that important, Like if you're a mathematician,
Almost never, in my opinion.
yeah, I don't like going like full. I try to hedge what I say. But yeah, so like if you're a mathematician and okay, you can in some sense operate with infinite quantities, but if you wanna generate, I don't know, 20 examples to try to find a pattern in a sequence or in a something like that, like you just want to be able to quickly write down a code that does that so you can keep your train of thought. You don't like you don't need for it to be of log n. No, you need to be fast to write and to get the results.
Yeah, you need to get answers fastly. Need to get the answers.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of on that topic you mentioned before. Yeah, so you as the programmer need to get to the solution quickly. You don't necessarily need the computer to perform the computation as fast as possible. But you mentioned before about was it an Alan Perlis bit about arriving at the solution is can be just as important as having it, because that's almost an antithesis to the sort of library framework world of a lot of the interpreted languages popular now. I guess I'm mainly talking about Python and R style. And given that part of the topic for today is about things that the array language community can do to improve their audience, or maybe get wider recognition, or whatever goals we have. The topic of a package manager and the ability to share code actually comes up a fair amount. But what do you think about having that? That's a way in which programmers can quickly arrive at a solution without having to care about much of the programming.
Yeah,
at all.
I think again it depends on how you frame it. Like if you move it to a tool for thought, I would say that mostly the arriving at the solution would be very important. I'll go with what Perley says. If you're framing as like a full-blown programming language that people will be building applications on top that have to be maybe rerun or all of that, then yeah, I think a package manager really helps. So it really depends on how you frame it.
I guess another question too is, do you have thoughts on, because you mentioned workflow augmentation, and you also operate in the ML space, and have been using Numpy and Jax's. It almost seems like there's multiple different spaces where array languages could thrive, but it sounds like actually the one that you're sort of arguing for as being like the best fit is not to replace your Numpy or Jax code or whatever language you're using. It's really for this. It's like the language that you could add to these note-taking apps, for like, even Marshall said a desktop calculator stuff. Like it's this notation for thinking and language for quickly doing things or something like that. So you're not necessarily writing, production APL scripts.
To be 100% honest, I'm kind of combining a good fit with easy fit. I think it's much easier to arrive at a tool for thought community and talk about APL, BQNJ as tools for thought, as notations, and all that, than it is to try to, displace Numpy, like dethrone Numpy and scream in the face of God or whatever. Yeah, because like just this space is the kind of space where Julia has a bunch of advantages and it's still not very used because there's just so much code in Python. Why would you move? Like if you come and say, okay, here's like my array language for neural networks or my array DSL for Python, you have to fight an immense inertia. And so that's why I'm like, when talking about APL, they all should focus on tool for thoughts. Like, I think this is a good fit. I think this is a somewhat easy sell. I do agree that having a DSL for Python or a new array language for deep learning would be amazing. would be. It would maybe even change the kind of neural networks we're building. Okay, I'm pretty sure it would. Like this, like the founder of my company, he was one of the authors of a very important paper, like attention zero needs, and he has another paper that's pretty much just like, okay, if you apply attention in the transpose axis, and now you get another cool neural network. And so just like if it was easy to think about the operations we're doing, I'm sure people would think of different architectures and all that. I just think that it's an uphill climb against the inertia of Numpy and all that.
So I guess what are the best ways to infiltrate this community that we have, or at least I have just discovered today that exists? Do we got to go do some podcast?
I think going to this Tools for Thought Rock that I sent you the link, the chat, is a great one. So like, the organizer is very open. So I think if you want to just go and talk about, oh, okay, here's BQN, here's J, here's APL, he'll be like, yeah, cool, we love that. And then you could go and talk about notation as a tool for thought and the different languages and how they work, and show the whole, like, look at how differently and how efficiently you're thinking about this. And they would already love that. And if in the last 10 minutes showed, oh, and now here's an extension for Brome, logseq that does it, and people would just go crazy about it. So yeah, the first stop would be doing that probably.
Interesting, yeah.
And then from there, just go into the Discords, show people how to use it, and there will be lots and lots of people interested in that. Like, really, they have such a variety of methods, and there's always so many people passionate about them, because at the end of the day, these things are for augmenting your thought, and people think differently. And if when you find something that really fits with the way you think, you just are like, whoa, I've been looking for this my whole life. And there will be people there that will be like, whoa, I've been searching for this for my whole life. Yeah.
There's a bunch of people searching for APL, waiting to find it. Huh. I wouldn't say I was searching for it, but definitely when I stumbled across it, I was like, 4 characters. 4 characters. I mean, that's one of the points of my talk, is that, like, I show, 3 different expressions that total, like, I don't know if it's 10 characters, and the equivalent in C++. And it's not to say one is worse or better. And the C++, I don't even know. It's like, it's got more lines than APL does characters across 3 lines. And I would probably say it's like 100 or 200 characters, could be more. And it's just, that is cognitive. It's a barrier to, like, cognition, like having to think about, what data structure am I going to use? How do I allocate? What do I initialize? Blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that goes along with it. And yeah, it's like you mentioned, that's the workflow augmentation is that a lot of the times you're just trying to do something. It doesn't matter whether you're using a statically sized thing versus a dynamically sized thing, or it's a, int 32 versus an int 64. And some people, I'm sure, are listening being like, what is that? It's like, yeah, it's like, you don't have to think about that in Python, It's,
yeah.
Yeah. Bob, Rich, Marshall, thoughts on this whole, we should be leaning more into the tool for thought?
I think Zhao should be like our evangelist marketing guru for these languages, because I think he's already got a sort of a plan marked out, which is excellent. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, it sounds like this tools of thought community is probably more predisposed towards accepting different ways of looking at things.
Yes, definitely.
Which in a lot of cases in the past, that's been one of the big challenges of the array languages, is you spend a lot of time, refuting people's mentions on or comments on Hacker News about, how this is all, nobody can read that. At a certain point, you just like, you're talking to a wall. You hope some people are, getting it after a while, but it sounds like within this community, people are already thinking in different ways. And so this is just another different way to think, which to me makes it very receptive to these languages, which is, I think, tremendously exciting.
Your minds are malleable. You're ready to join the array language cult. Very good.
Well, you see, the other part of it is the array languages could pick up a lot from these groups too, because my sense is, yes, my mind is malleable. That's sort of an ongoing life project to keep my mind malleable. But I think that's a state of mind as much as it is anything else. You have to work at that, and if you work at that, you're also open to other thoughts, and you're bringing in other information. I'm not limiting myself just to array languages. They are, to me, very exciting, and they do make me and challenge me to think in different ways. But if other things do as well, there's no reason I shouldn't be paying attention to them as well.
Yeah, I keep coming back to, and I've actually brought this up like a handful of times in the last month since we had Jeremy Howard on, was at the tail end of the episode, when we talked about myelination, and I learned that word, and he had the sort of the clip of him saying that, adults aren't good at learning things. And it's just, he talks about enjoying doing what he's doing because it self-selects. And, having brought that up, like sort of just in discussion over the last month with, a selection of people. And I think it's something that I don't think is like talked about enough, is that it's like, people don't like being told they're biased, even though we all are. Like we all live, our lives through our lived experience, and our experiences affect the way we think about things. But like, you show up at something and someone says, oh, you're biased. And it's like, you don't like hearing that, you don't like hearing that you might be bad at learning something, or that, people that have passed a certain age, literally biologically, like our brains have hardwired to try and not forget the things we've learned. I think that's like a valuable thing. It was sort of like a throwaway comment, or maybe it wasn't even a throwaway comment, but it's just, I keep on coming back to that. It's like how much of that affects process and just things generally in the world, outside of programming languages, that, we do things the way we do things because that's the way it's done. And it's we made some decision at some point in time, and just like,
there's a lot of inertia in it.
Yeah. It's, and that's not to say that we should upend all the systems and throw everything out, but it's just like, it's just...
Oh, is that not what we're saying? Oh.
It's just an interesting, like, asking the question, like, why, or like, why 5 times, and at the end of it, it's like, we actually don't really have a good reason, it's just, it just is, and, some decision was made. Anyways, it's...
Well, that kind of comes back around to Marshall's comment on performance, and at a certain point, you absolutely always have to be concerned with performance. If you're running around exploring, if you take it in historical terms, somebody exploring a new mass of land, they're never going to find the fastest points from A to B. That's not the idea. The idea is to find out where they are. And then over time, the people that live in the area will find the best ways to do things. That's kind of the way exploring works. But if you don't have any explorers, you're never going to find new territories to work from. So I think you need a mix of both. But in all cases, in the case of explorers, performance is down to how much energy do I have to put into finding this stuff. And at a certain point, I just have to get from point A to point B, and exploring is off the map. And I'm not going over that mountain to find out what's there. I'm going through the valley because that's quicker. And that's a reality of the way you have to approach these things, I think, to balance finding new things with how much time do I have and how much am I going to get back from finding these new things. The exciting part is if you go into an area that people know, chances are you're going to find things that they don't know about because they're on these regular paths that they always walk.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right, so I'm leaning towards NP hard.
All right.
But it's possible there's a dynamic programming approach. Because I'm pretty sure it's not even always the case that you want to make a move that aligns 2 of the numbers.
If you can make a move that makes the remaining numbers, won't keep going.
For the listener.
So you might be able to make a move that lines things up in such a way that your next move, even though it's between things, then lines up big groups of numbers.
Can our
I
listeners
don't have that airtight, but
can our listeners expect a BQN solution blog post or something by the time this is out?
This might become an open research problem.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I've seen on GitHub now you can add, or maybe it's I'm not sure if it's on all of them, but there's a button that clicks cite this. So it's like you can cite GitHub repos and generate the necessary. So, we should have one for our podcast now, clearly.
But they're not in Harvard or whatever format it is. MIT citation.
That's what our show notes are.
Yeah. I was going to name one, but honestly, I can't off the top of my head.
Well, the Raycast format needs to become the new standard then.
Having spent writing master's papers and working with APA, that just makes me shiver when I think about those.
You would be happy to know, Bob, that now, well, I'm not sure if you've done it recently, but when I was doing my thesis, they have programs now that you just, when you're on some site, there's plugins, you just click and you just, input it, similar to this logseek stuff. You just have a database basically of every single thing you've ever looked at. And then as you're referencing stuff, you generate some, I don't think it's a JSON file, but it's some markdown file that it's beautiful. It's just clicking buttons and you choose a format and it does it for you. And, Lord, I feel bad for the people. I mean, I was one of those people back in high school when you had to create those formatted things, and and they would dock you marks. And I'm like, well, I'm not a robot, how am I supposed to do this? And now they have the robots doing it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and that was just coming in when I was doing my master's thesis. So they were there, but they were usually wrong. So it was a matter of going in and having to redo them anyway.
All right, so we've hopped all over the place. I'm not sure, João, if there's other things that you sort of wanted to talk about in terms of,
I think conferences. I think there needs to be an array language conference that doesn't cost more than yearly scholarship in Brazil.
No, that's funny. Were you at the last BAA AGM as well? Because that also came up there, was the idea of... There's the BAA hosting some kind of... But then, we need to either, if it's in person, have some dotted around the world, or some online thing. Well, online things happen, but there's something about in-person stuff.
Yeah, I think I am organizing something about category theory for deep learning. Don't want to go into the details yet. And we're okay, let's try to do this in person. If we try to do it in person, it's likely that it won't happen. Okay, we do it online. It's much better to have it online, but have it it happening, than trying for in person and just all the difficulties end up making it impossible to happen.
And some of the things that I've seen done online, the benefit you get from that is you can do them with higher frequency without, so you're not trying to do everything in one weekend with the conference. You can do them over a series of months and do them, every 2 weeks. And you start to build on that. And you also, in the old, the things when I was doing my master's on online education, you give time for reflection, which is actually one of the most important parts of learning. It's not getting the information in, it's then reflecting on the information you have in your head and matching it to the things that you already know. And that is deep learning, and it's huge, and often it's overlooked because it's that thing that happens when you're not getting information poured into your head.
Yeah.
And those are the areas that I think a series of online, any one of them might not be significant, but I think if you looked back at a sequence of 5 or 6 over a couple of months, you'd find there had been significant information exchanged and some real possibly breakthroughs, depending on who you have on the calls.
Yeah.
And really, also the cost. The cost also matters a lot. Being online, just at the dialogue user meeting, the total cost, taking into account our ticket and the ticket price for the conference itself, since it's in euros, a big tech worker in Brazil would have a hard time going. That's the level of it.
Having recently been involved in the organizing of a conference, admittedly, I did not do most of the heavy lifting. I was just adjacent to the people doing the heavy lifting. But I love the idea of like having an ArrayCon, which is like, folks from the J community, the BQN community, the APL community, multiple tracks of different languages, Julia, R, everyone's invited, sharing, because I think there's tons of cross-pollination of ideas that would be awesome. Love the idea about it. It would be my most exciting conference that I would look forward to a year. But the idea of having like to see how much work and how expensive it is, like hiring all the AV people to record stuff. Like if I ever were involved, like there's no way I would do it in person just because of like one, the cost, and two, how much work it is. Like it's when I start to think of that, I'm like, I'd prefer to do some kind of summer school thing where you just like invite people to a location. There's no ticket, and then it's just like you throw people in a room and then they chat and give little lightning talks and stuff. I do think there are huge benefits to having in-person things, but just I think from a cost and like an amount of work, virtual is so much easier. And I think in the future, the future's coming. Like how many years that is, but like, say what you will about Meta, and whether they're helping or hurting the world, when there is what's that book that became a movie, Ready Player One. Ready Player One. Thank you. Like if that's the future, where like I don't necessarily need a haptic suit to go to a conference, but instead of going to what are they, GatherTown? I'm sure a lot of folks at this point are familiar, where you waddle around like a little Game Boy character. As soon as that becomes actually like putting on a HoloLens where you're walking around a virtual conference and it's more of actually feeling like you're in a 3D space chatting with people, I think the incentive for actually like the cost of in-person is really going to be hard to justify that, including like not to even mention the environmental impacts of everyone hopping on a plane and flying everywhere. At some point, it's just going to be like the virtual, no haptic suit required HoloLens conference is probably going to be the standard.
I think there are a couple AI conferences that happen over VR chat, in fact, during the pandemic.
What is VR chat?
Kind of what it sounds like on the tin.
It's one of those.
To be honest.
Yeah.
It's a chat service, but you're in VR. Like.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah.
Does everyone require a Oculus or a Vive or?
No, I think it even works on the browser in a normal PC if you want. So you can use a specific VR thing, or you can just use your normal computer.
Well, so part of the question is when setting up a conference is so easy, why do you even set up a conference? So, like you could hold a conference by chat, but then everybody would ask, why don't we all just pick a time and get together in the chat room, which is what we do. So I think it would probably evolve to be something where much more you can just meet with anybody at any time, as opposed to having a fixed conference schedule. And definitely there's a lot of value in people putting together presentations, but that doesn't necessarily have to be coupled with the sort of community aspect of the conference.
I was going to say, I think whenever you impose a constraint or a structure on something, you actually end up improving it. And I think that's one thing that conferences do, is that suddenly you've got a time to be there and a presentation you have to give if you're giving one. And it's the old deadline.
Yeah, so you think the time and the presentation together.
I think that introduces a constraint that actually improves things.
Because definitely... clearly the time, like Adam's done his apple cultivations on the APL orchard, the time is getting a lot of people together and discussing stuff. So that was, and he's done the current one is Apple Quest. He's doing things like that. So that on its own is clearly, helping be more of a community collaboration.
Yeah, the constraints surely help. But I'm kind of...
Yeah, it's possible that adding the papers is also doing a lot for conferences.
Were you going to say something else, João? Or?
Oh, that I'm kind of doing the idea of just getting people together for a bunch of projects. Like, I'm trying to, see cool people and like, okay, I think these cool people should chat with each other and so I'm just organizing random hangouts for folks. For example, the programming language hangouts that I had organized before.
Yeah, I do think too there is something like people have a limited amount of time and they're choosing,
Yes.
what to attend and what to go to. And I think there's a ton of value in just, opening up the chat room. Anyone that wants to join can join, and doing that on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, however often you want to do it. But there is something to be said about organizing something, not necessarily with a con at the end of it, PyCon, CPPCon, etc. con. But like it adds, so I don't want to say gravitas to what it's happening, but like it becomes an event where, potentially things might get announced or a special talk is being given, and it draws people there, and that snowballs into, you don't want to, you have a limited number of weeks of the year that you can take sort of off of work to spend on education. You're going to choose, and if there isn't a Raycon, that's going to generate attendance from a bunch more people that might not necessarily take the time to hop into a weekly call or sort of hangout or what you will. And there's tons of value to both, and I think there is something to be said about being less of a need for kind of conferences if communication becomes just so much easier when you can hop on some sort of video call. But I still think there's a ton of value in having some sort of labeled or named event that's, once a year or twice a year. Because then people ask, "Oh, are you going to this?" And it collects, a certain set of people that wouldn't necessarily be at those weekly discussions, which I think definitely adds value.
I think the key to that is the people that you put in as your keynote speakers and the people that you bring in to present at that, because it becomes a big event. I know, quite often Arthur Whitney comes up on this podcast, but if you had something like that, and I was at a J conference where, and I think Marshall was as well, where Arthur came on and gave a presentation, well, that's a big deal. You're going to go someplace to get that point of view, to see him and hear what he has to say about something. I think that becomes a big part of an annual conference, is you bring in speakers that people might not otherwise be able to interact with or listen to. And I think that's the big advantage of the tentpole events. But the smaller one can still work. And the example I'm thinking of is the British APL Association with COVID has moved from, I'm looking at their emails saying, "Oh yeah, we're meeting at this pub down the road," and and I'm thinking, well, that's great. And sometimes they're publishing what they've talked about, which was really great. It was, and Vector shows up and all those things. Those are wonderful things. I was hugely appreciative of that. But when they went online, I can participate in it. I can sit, there's time zones, but I can sit here and listen to their AGM and listen to discuss things and actually hear people talking back and forth. They do that every 2 weeks. Dialogue has seen the advantage of that with the videos that Rich and Adam have done. They do the same thing. They're alternating with the British APL Association now. It's a way to draw people in that isn't the big conference. And I think when you think about Dialogue's big annual user meeting, well, you got to realize that's being done for another reason. Like, that's being done for the people that are using Dialogue, the users of Dialogue, the companies that are using it professionally, and it's going to a place that is very expensive, but that is part of the process. As you're trying to develop that event, and in this case it's a place and a feeling that's that event, but that is really important. It's not to be minimized, and it's also not necessarily the way to reach a wider audience because of the cost, but I think for its audience it's actually very good at what it does.
Yeah, it's a great place for developing these sort of professional relationships in that space where there already are users. But I mean, that's also part of, I guess it did stem from moving online with the pandemic, but when we started doing the Apple Seed user meetings in the springtime, which is very much more, it's going to, if we continue to do that, stay free, be about reaching a wider audience, and stealing really good names of meetings from Marshall from from previous Orchard meetings. I think that's where the name came from.
Yeah, I did do a meeting of that name. I don't know if that was what caused you to have that name.
No, I think it was a coincidence, but I think I did ask.
I think so.
If I could take the name. But yeah, no, that's very much what that's about. If anyone wants to speak at the next one next spring, send your emails to anyone here will probably pick up the message.
Send your emails to anyone.
I think we've got apple seeds at Dialogue. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, we're a few minutes over, but just want to make sure that, João, there's nothing left on your list. We've got Tools for Thought, communities, sort of trying to reach out to them, conferences. Anything else you think that the Array folks could be doing, or is that the...
I think those are the most important ones, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been... I mean, I always love these discussions, but this has been awesome, and I'm looking forward to having you back in Toronto. And I was going to say, on the topic of, not that our listeners super care, but on the topic of, the virtualness of these, I still have yet to meet any of the panelists that make up this podcast, but that could change in the next week here, because I'm actually on Vancouver Island, only 30 minutes away from Bob, I think. So the virtualness of this podcast it'll remain, but I might actually get to meet one of the folks that we talk regularly with. But with that said, thank you so much for coming on, João.
Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to seeing the response we get, because I'm sure that there are a ton of folks listening to this that have different thoughts on things that the Array community could be doing better, and maybe a listener out there will go and create a virtual or in-person ArrayCon. One can wish. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and with that we will say happy Array programming.
Happy Array programming.